Good afternoon. This is Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, February 4th, 2020. First on our agenda, we have a discussion regarding safe routes to parks. Ms. Menser, welcome.
Thank you.
Back from Florida.
Back from Florida. Our fine team representing this wonderful community and doing a very good job of it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on.
Would you just
Can I hand it to you?
state your name and who you're with for the
One more
recording, please?
sheet.
Thank
Sarah
you.
Menser, 2305 Timber Creek Drive, Marion. And I am with Be Well Marion, formerly Blue Zones Project.
Thank you.
Okay. In probably May or June of this year, Lynn County Public Health was invited by the National Association of City-County Health Organizations and the CDC to participate with three other communities in a workshop to help focus on active living and active living plans. A little plug for Lynn County Public Health. I'm not affiliated with them, but they were selected because of the great work that they do and how well they are respected nationally. So I know we have them here and we kind of take for granted all that they do, but they are very well thought of on a national level, and that's why we were one of 3 communities invited. So Lynn County Public Health reached out, and they took a representative from the Wellbeing Committee in Cedar Rapids, a member of the CMPO, Multimodal, and then some of their staff, and then myself. And it was all paid for by the CDC and NACCHO for us to attend this down in Atlanta at CDC headquarters. So what they did is we were given options around active living and asked to select an action plan on an area that promoted active living. Because of the work we had already done, some of the communities were looking at things with complete streets and safe routes to schools. But because we had communities here in Lynn County that had already done that, we wanted to find something that would fit with all different size communities and those that had implemented things from complete streets to those that did not have that option. We picked something that is new to Iowa. All of these are evidence-based activities. Okay, that's what was really around how we're going to track and metrics and how this moves people, gets them active. We chose a new thing for Iowa called Safe Routes to Parks. There are only a few of these in the country, but it's not as comprehensive as a complete streets. It's a little more along the line of safe routes to schools, where you take a targeted area and you kind of identify that and look for a focus on it. So the Safe Routes to Parks is something that can be done in a community of 500. It can be done in a metropolitan area. Places in Atlanta have it, small communities have it. So we worked with the experts from the CDC and NACCHO, and they helped us develop. Our goal was, over the 2 days we were there, to help look at an action plan on how you could implement this within communities. So we worked with our experts and best practices and examples to bring back to Lynn County as a completely optional for communities opportunity to teach people what are safe routes to parks. What is this? And so I am here today to talk to you a little bit about, and a lot of it is in the packets there. There's an example of what is the safe routes to parks. It's really kind of a way of thinking, and it's very similar in the safe routes to schools. It's looking at if we have a park or green space or gathering area, how do people get to it? Can they get to it? Can you walk to that? Are there sidewalks that connect into that park? Can you bike to it? Are there trails in? Can people with disabilities get to the places that they want within that area? And so the Safe Routes to Parks plan is more of a way of thinking than it is a hammer down type of a policy. Just to back up for a moment, I want to read some statistics to you as to why we continue to talk about this moving naturally, connections, being active in communities, and nudging people to an active lifestyle. In our latest statistics, Iowa, this is from the State of Obesity 2018, Iowa moved from 4th most obese state in the country to 7th. So we're going in the right direction, but we are still in the top 10. 15.3% of high school youth are obese. In Iowa, that's 13th in the nation. 16.4% of children aged 10 to 17 are obese. That's 14th in the nation. 15.2% of WIC participants age 2 to 4 are considered obese. That's 13th in the nation. In Lynn County, we have 67.8% of adults who report themselves as obese or overweight. Less than half, 46.5%, of Lynn County adults meet recommended guidelines for physical activity, and among Lynn County adolescents, only 26% are getting 1 hour of physical activity a day. So the small working group that went to Atlanta is working on drafting and how we can work with communities to come up with a Safe Routes to Parks plan in a community if they are interested. I am here today to talk to you and ask the councils kind of go forward, keep thinking about this if you are interested, to pull together a group of citizens including AARP, folks with disabilities, neighborhood groups if they are interested, and start to look at what a policy, a Safe Routes to Parks policy could look like in this community. Of course, we would also involve staff. We've talked to the Parks Department. The Parks Board has seen an overview of what a Safe Routes to Parks plan looks like. And also, Kesha and I and BPAC have also looked at what this would mean. Because one of the advantages of us having this, if we would do it, if this isn't a comprehensive, we're going to go all over the whole community and find every green space and find a plan for it. It's really a way for citizens, leadership, to say, if we want to do this, how do we identify priority parks or spaces? And if we have identified those, when there are opportunities, there's a National Safe Routes to Parks Foundation. They do yearly grants. There are other grants available. There are other potentially transportation grants that are available. Because while Safe Routes to Schools does impact communities and youth, obviously, and some neighborhoods, the Safe Routes to Parks is really comprehensive and affects all of our citizens of all ages. So if we have a plan and a bit of a priority process for selecting what they would be, when we have those grant opportunities available and if we have a plan in place, we are able to submit that to help with some funding. So not asking for any funding, not asking to approve a plan, really just looking for permission to explore a potential policy with other members of the community and other groups within the community that would have interest, and then bring that back with the staff to council.
So then if we adopt the policy, then that would just inform future projects that would fit?
Right. It's a way to think if we're developing a park or working with already with the parks plan, how does, and some of that's done to this extent right now when they're looking at the impact out on the parks, but really, okay, so this is going to be this park space, or really we need to look back on retro some of the older areas of the community that may have not had the same sidewalk requirements at that time, and access points, and say, how do people get into this park? And some of it's a walk audit. Can you walk into it? Can you bike into it? It's more of a way of, a way of thinking and just an awareness as we put these spaces together. Are we going to need a crosswalk at this particular point? Where do the people who use this park, and a lot of it's neighborhood outreach. If you're in that neighborhood and you're using that space, to the neighbors, how do you access the park? Do you use it? If you don't use it, why don't you use it? How can we make this be a place that the community can get together? So it isn't meant to be a way that's going to upend a budget or restructure a whole plan. It's really, as things become available, how can we do that, and a way of thinking when we're already planning and bringing community groups together to talk about how we can get them more active in using our resources.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Renee?
Yeah, so I know you said this is kind of new. There aren't a lot of other ones to look at, but if we were to move forward on this, I know you mentioned grant funding. Is that typically how other places have funded this 100%, or does it turn into a partnership with the city? What other funding sources aside from grants would you look at to sustain this?
I think it would really be part of already existing funds as far as prioritization of where improvements were going to happen and why they would happen there. We wouldn't want to change what was already being planned out, but what would happen. And then, yeah, there's a lot of grant funding and what we can find with that. Some of it could be low-hanging fruit. It's just it's paint, that you need a crosswalk in. Other parts of it, it's kind of overlaying it onto the other plans that exist. But it isn't now we need to put a bucket over here to complete these projects at all.
Gotcha. And then, I think it sounds like a great idea given that we have more than 24 parks. I would just plant the seed if we do approve this to try to get some better connectivity from the south side of Marion to the new Y, because that's been an issue about the location being so far north, but this sounds great.
For sure.
Thanks.
Will?
Yeah, I'm all in favor for the city going along with this. One thing I'd like to ask or recommend, if it's not been talked about, not only consider parks, safe routes to parks, but some neighborhoods that don't have parks, safe routes to trails, which hopefully we consider the park and maybe get to the trail, which can get you to the park. So
Absolutely. That's a great piece of it.
consider the trails parks also.
Yep.
I don't know if our Parks Director has a comment or any particular
No,
opinion on.
the Deputy Director, Seth, and I met with Sarah previously and reviewed kind of a draft of a policy, and at this time we're fully supportive of moving forward with something associated with working with Sarah and other organizations and city staff to try to come up with a policy to bring back to City Council for approval.
Any other comments?
Just a question.
Yes.
Yes, I'm in support of it. Wonderful idea. So this work would sort of look at what we currently have and give some suggestions on how to create those safe connections, right? And then it would inform us as we continue to develop and build how we should do that to make sure there's safe routes. Is that correct?
Correct. Is
Okay.
there a way? Is a neighborhood using that space? How are they getting into that space? Are they not using a certain space because is it a light? They don't feel like they can. And also we talked a little bit not only to the parks, but if there is a desire in working with Parks Department, once you get to the parks, can they move within the park? So if you get in there and you have a disability, can you get to the splash pad? Or can you get to this point? Is it usable once they're there? And that's the second part of it, and that if citizens are interested or if staff is interested to look at as well. We just want to get people out and moving and gathering and being a community.
Yeah, I'm in full support. I don't know how it can be negative for us, and the policy would help to orient our thinking with projects that are going to happen anyway, that we're working on, that we're maybe doing in the future, to orient our thinking in a way that accommodates safe routes to parks. So I think it's a great thing.
If I could just say
Yes, sir.
one thing too. Also, what I think would come out of this is some relevancy to how we design the parks. So new parks and how we ensure that the policies that are implemented to ensure that public access to new parks is made a course of how those are designed.
Correct. Thank you for undertaking that.
Thank you. So we will be back. We'll working with Kesha and Seth to start with, but to make sure we're engaging the groups that want to be involved in that and the staff that needs to be involved and wants to be, and then we'll give you updates as you request. Thank you.
Kesha and Seth are just the right people to help with it.
That's a good team.
Thank you. All right. Moving on with the rest of the first page, nothing is marked for discussion. If there's anything, you have something, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be easier. I'm planning to abstain on 1A1 for January 21, 23, and 24. So normally we confer up here before the meeting, and then we pull it out, and we make all these motions. I don't know if it'd be easier to just separate that on the agenda or handle it Thursday, but I thought I'd mention it in case there was a preference.
Okay. Let's
Thanks.
see. Rachel decide. Okay. If there's nothing on page 1, move on to page 2. We have 2 items that are marked. That prior to those 2 items, 8 and 9, is there anything that anyone wants to discuss in particular? Okay, number 8, audit report.
Thank you, Your Honor. Jennifer Decker from Hogan Hansen is here to give a short presentation on the audit and to answer any questions you may have.
Welcome.
I'm a bit under the weather, so I will try to talk as loudly as possible.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay. Well, like I was so kindly introduced by Leanne, I'm Jennifer Decker. I'm with Hogan Hansen. And thank you once again for allowing me to come present today the results of your June 30, 2019 audit report. I would like to thank Leanne and the city staff for all the assistance that they provided while we were completing our audit. We did issue an unmodified opinion in English. That means the good opinion for the city. And overall, the city is in financially good condition. I'll share a few highlights. It's 77 pages long, so I won't go through every page in the interest of all of your time. We do present your financial statements on the accrual basis of accounting, which is different than the cash basis of accounting, which is what the city reports under. So there are cash to accrual conversions. We have both cash financial statements as well as accrual financial statements within these 77 pages. Your governmental fund balances, which include your general fund, debt service fund, capital projects funds, and special revenue funds, increased by approximately $4.4 million for the year. Your general obligation debt did increase by $14,945,000. As of June 30, 2019, the general fund, which is your chief operating fund of the city, had a fund balance of $11.7 million. In comparison, your total expenditures of the general fund were approximately $22.1 million. So if you take your $11.7 million of general fund reserves that you have, that gives you a good indication of where you sit financially within that general fund. Your business type activities net position increased approximately $1.4 million. Those activities are your sewer rental replacement, the city communication utility, solid waste replacement, urban forest utility, et cetera. So all of your enterprise funds it increased $1.4 million. We do include the data from your component units within your financial statement report because GASB says we have to. So those are all presented in different columns of your report because if we didn't include them, your financial statements would be misleading. We also are required to report any deficiencies that we find during our audit. Those are located at the end of your report, starting on page 75, where we summarize our findings. We did note 2 material weaknesses in regards to segregation of duties, which is a finding that we have every year, and we will continue to unless you hire a whole bunch of people. And then related to financial statement preparation, what that finding relates to is that you rely on your audit firm to make those cash to accrual conversions and to write the notes to the financial statements. Very common finding in cities of the size of Marion. It's a cost benefit thing, just like segregation of duties. And then on pages 76 and 77 are the statutory reporting findings, along with the it's either a yes or a no, so either you pass or you fail. So those are listed at the end of the report. So the disbursements did not exceed the budget, that is noted. We did note a few questionable expenditures that might not meet a public purpose doctrine from the Attorney General's opinion dated April 25th of 1979. Those are listed, and we just need you to know as the council to make sure that you understand that there is a close scrutiny deserved to those types of expenditures. We're not in the opinion-making business of whether they're legal or not, but those are noted at the end of the report. No expenditures of city money for travel expenses of spouses or city officials or employees were noted. We had no business transactions noted between city council or city officials or employees. Surety bond coverage was proper. No transactions were found that we believe that should have been reported in the council minutes but were not. And council minutes were published in accordance with the Code of Iowa. We noted no instances of noncompliance with deposit and investment provisions, and your annual urban renewal report was properly approved and certified to the Iowa Department of Management on or before December 1st. We did note that TIF debt outstanding was not reported correctly, and that is just a matter of how their report is structured, and I'm not going to comment on the Department of Management, but the way they do their report is not exactly the way that our city finance person would do the report, and we find that there's no issue, but we have to give a finding because it doesn't meet the Department of Management's requirements, okay? The city did complete and file its June 30, 2019 annual financial report by December 1st, but we did note there was a proprietary fund balance that was incorrect. However, it is correct as of the end of the year, so we just had to note that. And then if any citizens or you all are bored at night, this report is also available online on the Auditor of State's website. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Questions?
It's exciting stuff, right?
Well, yeah, it is exciting stuff. One of the areas I always look at is at the end of the report with the findings of the management report and comments. And so, yeah, the first two are repeated ones,
Right.
which probably are not going to be changed anytime in the near future.
No, definitely not.
The other ones certainly did not give me any concern.
I have no heartburn about any of the things in the report, okay?
Is there any comment at all about the exceptions on the expenditures, those 3 items? I know we've had them in the past, and
I assume when you say the exceptions, you're talking about the scheduled findings that are covered under the policy that City Council has passed for retirements and certain,
no.
like flower arrangement.
The questionable expenditures.
Just questionable expenditures under.
Yes, and these all are covered under policies that City Council has passed. So the 3 that were listed was one for a flower arrangement, food that was purchased from Hy-Vee for a strategic planning session, and then various meal expenses of the city manager and department heads. So all 3 of those are covered under a City Council policy.
Just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Okay, number 9, who's taking that one?
This one I just wanted to point out, that if approved, this would change the start time of the July 9th council meeting to 4 o'clock, and it was a request from council to change this meeting time, so.
Okay. And we'll publish that well ahead of time so everyone knows. Yes, ma'am.
And unless something occurs actually on the 9th, so if we could make any closed session or proclamations happen on Tuesday too. So we're going to get out of here. Thanks.
Nothing on the agenda.
Got to get my Marion on.
That's right. Okay. Anything on the remainder of items on page 2? Any questions or discussion on those items? The remainder of page 2. Page 3 also has nothing marked. Feel free to bring up any item on that page. All right, we have one item marked by staff for discussion on page 4. If there's anything prior to that anyone would like to discuss, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Now I'm trying to find the sheet. I have a question about the airport runway $28,000 charge. When I looked at the sheet for backup that I can't find right now, sorry, wait a minute, here it is. Yes. I noticed on the back there was a change order, and I was just wondering if we could have a little more detail on what the change order was for and what the amount being requested for approval is specifically going for. Is it asphalt on the runway, or is it some other airport when I looked at the background in previous council action, it didn't help fill in those gaps. So the $28,405, is that,
Okay, good evening. The 28,000, that's just a normal partial payment. That's not in relation to any change order. If you can recall, I believe it was either or late last week, there was some earthwork happening off of 44th Street near 3rd Avenue, Rachi area, the new public service building area. They were utilizing this winter work period to take the excess material from the runway construction to the site off of 44th Street. So that was work done during this month's time frame, and it was just normal partial payment for that work that was completed.
do you know what the change order for the 9,200 is for?
We've had a few change orders on this project. One included just the winter work. We have a yellow, big 60-foot long yellow X on each end of the runway that marks that it's closed. And during the winter, we have to make sure that it keeps plowed. So that's one of the change orders, and I'd have to go into further detail to look up the other ones at this time. But
Okay, and I appreciate that. So I guess my question is, there are some things that I guess I don't have a full understanding of in terms of, I think everyone knows where I am about the airport, and I am fine with the lighting, and I'm fine with the expansion and the repaving of that. What I'm not fine with is the fence and some other things. And so how will I know when I'm voting what this money's going to? Because if it's just going to continue to be, you know, a chunk of money toward the whole thing, and I don't agree with the whole thing, is it just easier for me to vote no? Or is there a way to get more detail without making staff have to do too much?
Well, the only items that would be allowed underneath these expenditures would be the ones that are related to the contract or a change order to the contract, which the council sees change orders as well. There's no fencing or anything that's associated with this. This is the runway improvement and the lighting. If those other ones were to be contemplated, they would have to come to the city council for future bidding and as separate projects. So the council would have a chance to see them.
So the runway and the lighting total 1.8 million? Because the lighting was like 300 and some thousand, right? So the runway expansion is the rest of that?
correct, that's the removal and replacement of portions of the runway and the overlay of the remaining runway.
Okay.
The 37, about approximately 3,700 feet, and then the lighting that's associated with that.
Okay, and it's just those two things? Okay, I'm good then.
And related work, I mean,
Right,
you know,
that
earthwork,
goes
that
with
sort
it,
of thing.
but no other infrastructure, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, I'm good. Thanks, Nick.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Mr. Brandt.
I should go back a page, whoops.
Okay.
Back a page to 3, and I'm just curious, Highway 13 in Hennessy, traffic signal, what's the status of that?
For that project, there was a contractor error when they poured the signal pole bases, and we are currently working through that error with the contractor to find a recommended route to proceed with that, whether that be remove and replace or retrofit of the poured concrete bases themselves to make the signals work. The signals did arrive in early January, and that's when they discovered the problem when they went to install, and they did not fit.
Signals bases wrong. Oh, jeez.
The anchor bolt pattern on the bases, to be more specific.
Wow.
Any idea on when you think there'll be a decision made on what to do?
We're hopeful for a decision in this month, and as far as when they will be installed, that would depend on the decision.
Can I go back one more?
Yes, sir.
One more page, and this is just
That's what we're here for. So
yeah,
go ahead.
and this isn't really a question. This is more of a where did it go? Sorry, now I got to figure out where I'm at on this thing. This is more of a statement to the police chief. I totally lost it. Public safety, C1, with the lateral transfers. Fantastic work. I'm very happy to see that. I think that's long overdue.
Thank you.
So, good job. That's all I have.
Okay. Anything else? before we get to A3 on the regular agenda. Okay, so we're on A3.
Yep. Thank you, Your Honor. A3 is the public hearing that we will hold on the proposal to enter into general obligation debt for the library development project. As the council will likely remember, we did pass the amendment to the urban renewal plan, which allows us to issue debt under the urban renewal statute for an amount not to exceed $7 million.
Questions? Okay. Any questions or issues with the remainder of the items on page 4? Renee, go ahead.
Yes. This is just a kind of a curiosity thing. It's on A1, the solicitors, peddlers, and transient merchants. What's an example of this? Is this a political solicitation? Is this encyclopedia sales at your door? Who is this?
We recently had someone with the Gazette come in, and it was for minors to go door to door, and so they pulled an application, but we had to make them, or tell them that they had to fill out that DCI form.
I get the minors issue, but I didn't realize people needed a permit to go door to door. Is that true?
So when they go door to door, if they're knocking on doors and talking to people, then they would need this license.
Anybody who's going door to door for anything?
Not political, but...
Not political, but
yeah.
I mean somebody selling...
Solicitation.
Yeah, any kind of, financial advisors knocking on your door?
Yeah, we do have several that have a standing license every year. So Edward Jones, I think, has several people.
Yeah, so just for the citizens, how would any of us, do we ask to see some card? Does Marion issue them something?
They're required to carry along a license. It's just a full sheet of paper that says that they're approved. It's signed by the mayor.
I'm going to start asking. Thank you. Just wanted to know what I could do.
Not political stuff.
So I
No,
can't
but
buy
I
Boy
have
Scout
Edward
popcorn
Jones
at my
coming
door
by.
without them? Maybe that's not for profit, I guess. I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're on D1, which is the top of page 5.
Good afternoon. First item on the agenda under Parks, we have bringing back up the naming of this future park off of 29th Avenue. We'll have the public hearing this Thursday for the and then the council to consider the naming of Prairie Hill Park. And I know that we've previously discussed all this, so we don't need to go into a lot of the detail. I will note that our department, we have not received any comments one way or the other about the naming so far. So just let you know about that. And just kind of in alignment with these new park development projects and naming of the parks, that we do have an open house that is upcoming here at the end of February. Actually on the 25th, I believe, is what we have scheduled, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Lowell Park. Kind of an open house, public outreach for not only the development of this future park, but then also the redevelopment of Gill Park, with the additional 1.5 acres that we've added to that, along with the water department. So got some conceptual designs, and we're going to do an open house outreach to the public to help us guide the development of those two parks. So
You said that's on the 25th?
on the 25th, yep.
Where?
Lowell Park, out of the
Lowell
Arts and Environment Center building.
Perfect. Any questions for Mr. Carolyn?
And then second item that I have on the agenda is 2080 agreement. And this goes back to the tennis court project the joint project that we did with the Marion Independent School District. A little bit of delay in getting the 28E agreement put together. I think everybody's aware there's been a lot of things going on at Marion Independent, a lot of changes in positions, though, and so it just took a little. This one kind of got shelved for a little bit until pulled it back out. Now we have something to bring forward to the council. I'm just going to run through a few of, not all of the items within the 2080, but just a few of the more important ones. The first thing that I had highlighted was just wanted to state the city's contribution to the project. So that's the first item that I highlighted. The second one, which is number 1, is this: that as part of that project, there were 2 courts that were going to be lined for pickleball. We just wanted to make sure within the agreement that part in that language stays, so that we always have those 2 courts over there for pickleball use. Number 2 then that we had was that the school district would be responsible for all maintenance, repairs, and utilities of the tennis courts. And then number 6 is basically to identify the hours of public use, which is 6 to 10 p.m., which basically aligns with park hours, which is 6 to 10. So we had agreed to that as part of the overall agreement. And then on the second page, we have just language that speaks to the joint administration of the tennis courts, and then just identifying those administrators to be the parks director and the school superintendent for that. And then number 10, I just wanted to note this on the 2080 that the mayor will sign. You will need to write in Thursday's date on that. That's when we approved it. So I just wanted to note that. And then 13. Under 13, basically speaks to if we were to terminate the 2080 agreement, and basically terminate the 2080, it would be a mutual thing that both the city and Marion Independent would need to agree on. Within that, there's just some language that speaks to the contribution and just somewhat recovery of a prorated amount of that up in a period of the first 15 years of the agreement. And then the last item that I had highlighted was 17, which just basically identifies a structure if we needed to settle some dispute between the 2 organizations and how that would be facilitated within there. And then finally, I'll just state that this 2080 as presented was reviewed by both legal teams from the city and also for the school district, and it did go before the school board at its last meeting, and they did approve it. So if there's any questions, be happy to address those at the council.
Yes.
I'll just give you one minor comment, and I can attest that the pickleball lines are there on 2 courts, but I also will state that the pickleball lines are really difficult to discern from the other colors that are there. They just kind of blend in and are more difficult to pick up when you're playing there because of all the different shades of green that are there.
Okay.
So it'd have been nice if they were a little more distinct from the other colors for the tennis courts.
And that's something we can go back to and talk to the district about that and see. That's the first time I've heard anything from any comment from anybody, Steve.
And I'll
as
have the
far
same
as that.
discussion with the Y, because I've talked to Bob there, and their intent is to have pickleball lines on all 6 courts at the new Y, so that'll give the city certainly more places to play pickleball year-round. But again, I've heard that talked about for so long by so many people, I finally had to try it last fall. And so it's a fun little sport to play. But
Okay? Yes, sir.
Does it state in there anything about when the school's using it for meets or whatever that are
Yeah, basically,
closed?
there's language that basically speaks to first rights for activities the school district. They have those. And so it would be any time that it's not in use by the school district that it could be used for the public.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mike.
Yep.
On to engineering. E1.
All right. First up, we have a discussion on the Stormwater Advisory Committee's recommendations for the Pheasant Trail 4th Homeowners Association's Neighborhood Drainage Assistant Program request. Just to give you some quick background, previously City Council received and filed correspondence from the association detailing some drainage issues and requests for assistance. At that time, City Council directed engineering to investigate possible solutions and report back to the association. Engineering completed that, reported back to the association, and subsequently they submitted a Neighborhood Drainage Assistant Program application. With that application, it goes to the Stormwater Advisory Committee. They reviewed the application and came up with 2 recommendations. Those are items 2 and 3 on the agenda. Basically, the first recommendation was to have Marion Public Service develop a maintenance plan for the drainage way that is north-south adjacent to the site. And the site here is basically these 3 sets of streets. It's Mallard Court, Messinger Court, and Spoonbill Court off of 44th Street and 29th Avenue. So the north-south drainage way would be just to the east of there. You can kind of see it with the aerial photo and the different shades there. That was a unanimous recommendation from the Stormwater Advisory Committee. And then the second recommendation was the approval of the Drainage Assistant Program reimbursement of up to $5,000 for the drain tile material. Any discussion or questions?
Questions?
Go
ahead, Mr. Brandt.
Just for everyone to know, I'm going to abstain. I believe I should just abstain from this just because I have a past client who lives on one of those streets, and I'm currently working with one of their relatives in my business, so I'm going to abstain from anything on this one.
Okay, Ms. Gadela?
Yeah, I just had a question about if this gets approved and moves through, who will actually install the drain tile?
The association is actually currently working on installing the drain tile. They are working on that at this time without knowing whether or not that this gets approved or not.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
so
Jensen.
I know, Nick and I and a few others were involved in some meetings with this group here at City Hall. And again, my recollection in looking at that area and observing it is the fact that those were just built too low, and the ground level should have been probably another 2 to 3 feet higher. Hence, they wanted all the walkout lower levels, and so now they're dealing with this problem because of the manner and how it was all built. But do we really think, do you and the association feel that this is going to be do we feel there's a viable solution for the drainage problem that they have? Because to me, it goes back to when they were built, not necessarily what's happening to the east of it or what's happening to the north of it. So.
How do I want to say it? We agree with the Stormwater Committee's recommendation. Staff does, both recommendations. This is going to be a wet area, and there will likely still be wet periods of time in these backyards.
Okay.
And you said that the association is currently working on making the improvements.
Correct.
And so we're doing this to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. And yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, so we've been dealing with this issue. As you know, we met with that neighborhood, and Public Service has been out there every year for the past 3 years.
Sure.
So in terms of developing a maintenance plan, it's going to be limited. Whatever we do, Public Service out there is not going to resolve these issues. So I just want the council to be aware of that fact. We were in that meeting. So no matter what we do, it's not going to address the issues of their backyard.
But they have determined this is something they want to do, and they're
Absolutely.
undertaking the improvements, so.
Yep.
Okay.
We have the Neighborhood Drainage Assistance Program has $10,000 budgeted annually, and this is the first request we've received in years.
So the council's aware we probably won't be back there for a while because we spent a good 3 years digging that out. The issues they're running into are really have to do with their backyards.
Right.
So whatever maintenance plan we develop is going to be limited in scope.
Okay. Yeah, I want to make sure that the association understands this is probably the extent to what the city will do or needs to commit to do, because it's not a city-driven problem. Okay.
I just have a follow-up question to that. So the plan that is put together is something that you all will support over a certain period of time?
So the way I understand it, and I haven't seen anything on it, the Stormwater Committee would like Public Service to develop a maintenance plan. Typically, our maintenance plan is that we inspect the ditch lines, we clean them if necessary, we make sure that they flow. In this particular instance, there's a lot of vegetation that is hard to control. We got a wetland up here, and it's going to keep continuing to creep up. Whatever maintenance plan we develop, it will address the drainage of the ditch. That's a public ditch, but it may or may not resolve the issues they have in their backyard.
So, so why would we do that then if it doesn't help them? I mean, we are giving them maybe the idea that that would help them, but I'm hearing you say that it probably isn't going to. I mean, what we're talking about.
I'm saying it may or may not.
Yeah.
It's just a very wet area down there. And so Public Service will do their best to address it. We've been down there a lot lately, and we've ignored a lot of other issues in Marion because of it. But we have to be fair to the rest of the city. We'll develop a maintenance plan, but it's going to be limited in scope.
So what I guess I should have made my comment differently. What I'm suggesting is not that you should do something differently.
Yep.
Just wondering if this is a good use of our time to be doing this if we know it's not going to help them in the long run.
There's nothing wrong with developing a maintenance plan. It's always good to outline maintenance plans.
Yeah.
It's good for liability purposes. It's also good for the association to see that and to understand that this is what we're going to do. We don't have a problem doing it, but the expectations can't be that we have to be back there every year. We just can't do it. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anything more on that item?
Spend enough time on that neighborhood.
Okay. Moving on to number 4.
Okay. This is our annual Iowa SUDAS updates. If you probably recall, Mike, about every year around this time, brings 2 huge binders, sits them down here and asks you if you want to go through them. I won't do that for you, but
Thank you.
So every year, the Iowa statewide SUDAS committee gets together and provides yearly updates to our construction design and specifications manual. The first item, number 4, would be approving that. And basically, it's just relatively minor corrections every year. There was really nothing of any note this year, but it's just an annual update for that. The second item, number 5, is the City of Marion supplemental specifications to SUDAS. Every year, engineering staff gets together and sees if there's any other supplemental specifications we want to add to this document. Typically, that includes like our fire hydrants, traffic signals, special items that are special to Marion that wouldn't be applicable statewide that we want to specify. Again, there was a few relatively minor corrections to that we included, but nothing really of anything to note significantly. And then the item number 6, that it's actually our first installment of this. It will be a supplement to the SUDAS design manual. The design manual is typically used by consulting engineers to design the actual construction plans. And this year's first edition will basically align some of the items in the design manual to how we actually practice them. That could be driveway widths, that sort of thing, that are specific to Marion, that are kind of ambiguous in the design manual, and they leave it up to the municipalities. And we felt it was time to actually put together a document that would spell that out and that we could give to consultants instead of answering a lot of questions. So those are those 3 items. If there's any question on that?
Yes, ma'am.
On the last one that you just mentioned, is there any overlap with the planning department? Do you guys ensure that the standards you're recommending for Marion that you put to the state jive with what planning's doing as well, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Yeah, most of these are technical details that we don't really get to.
Just engineering, just the engineering?
Yeah, they usually bring it up if there's some standards that relative. But I actually don't sit down and go through them unless engineering says, hey, this is something you might want to look
Gotcha.
at. But most of it's specifications on how design is done.
And I only ask because I know that we have, from the planning side of things, upped our design standards specifically in Marion. So as long as they talk to each other if they need to.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Great. The next on the agenda is items 7 and 8. That's Seymour Trail Phase 3 project. On the map I have above, that'd be in the blue, which is kind of tough to see, but that would be the removal of the west bridge, taking that down, cleaning off the steel girders, and putting that back up in place with the railroad theme that's been discussed, as well as the trail from that bridge to essentially Marion Boulevard's bridge in blue there. So what is on the agenda is the project calendar for that. The engineer's preliminary construction estimate is around $1.68 million. This is being let through the Iowa DOT. Sealed bids will be received on February 18th, 2020. Work shall commence no later than July 13th of 2020 and be completed in 150 working days. And the liquidated damages are $1,500 per day on that project.
So it should be completed by the end of the year?
150 working days in July. It all depends on weather, obviously, but that could push back into the spring of 21.
Oh, working days.
Yeah, correct.
Project doesn't move fast enough.
None of it.
Okay. Are there any questions on that? And this is phase 2.
This is phase 3.
Phase 2 is the removal of the bridge, the other bridge.
No, that's phase 1. I'll pull up the map.
Oh, that's phase 1.
Phase 1 is actually the pink. That's just the removal of the bridge.
Okay.
They actually just completed some asbestos work on that either last week or the week before. And so that's started under contract. Phase 2 is actually in the green there. That's the replacement of the aggregate trail, limestone trail from basically Marion Boulevard, Thomas Park to Menards. That we're still working on getting that out to bid as soon as we can as well.
Okay. And the money for phase 3, that's all in the budget, and it's all budgeted? Okay, perfect.
Okay. Item number 9 is the 2020 storm sewer project. The storm sewer project this year is drain tile installations along the back of curb and residential neighborhoods. Some of the streets you're looking at here, Pleasant View Drive on the south side, 11th Avenue kind of in the middle part of Old Town. Then we got 25th, 27th, and 28th Avenue kind of by 29th Avenue and 31st Street. Mission Avenue off of Squaw Creek, and then drain tile installation in Lau Park to address some drainage issues just south of the ball fields. The engineer's construction estimate for that project is $180,000. Sealed bids will be received on March 10th. Work shall commence no later than August 17th and be completed within 40 working days. And there is $300 in liquidated damages per day for this project. This is an annual program that's funded through storm sewer funds and is budgeted. Correct.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Two
Brandt.
questions. When you go in and do these streets, do you typically only do one side?
Well, we look at, a lot of times, it all depends on the case, but like Pleasant View, we're doing both sides, but the 25th, 27th, 28th Avenues, we're only doing one side because there's actually drain tile already on the other side. And then we look at it at a complaint basis as far as public service goes, where they're having icing issues with sumps during the wintertime that are running, and it may just be one side versus the other.
The reason I asked that, because my street was done a few years ago, but on the other side, and I didn't know if they were going to come back and do my side eventually. But and then second question, it might be more with Mike also. When I saw Lau Park on there, I was wondering if that was to the north of the building where there was all the water last year for events, where it was all muddy. I didn't know if there was tiling going in there. I don't know if there's been any more discussion about doing anything at Lau for that potential water issue there.
Yeah, we're currently looking at some different options of what we can do as far as with that drainage through those flat areas, but we have nothing that's scheduled right now, though.
I just saw Lau Park and thought maybe that was what it was, but okay. Thanks.
Other questions or comments on this item? Number 10.
And the last one, number 10, is the 2019 14th Street reconstruction project that's funded through our neighborhood street improvements program. That is 14th Street from Brockman Avenue to 12th Avenue, right next to St. Joseph's Church and school area. The engineer's estimate for this reconstruction is $853,000. Bids will be received on March 10th. Work shall commence no earlier than June 15th and no later than June 22nd. That's due to St. Joe's Days. We don't want to start before or during that. We're going to start right after, and so we worked with the church to coordinate that schedule. We have 70 working days on this project, and liquidated damages are $500 per day. Again, that's budgeted through our neighborhood street improvements program.
What makes like this street a candidate for reconstruction over some others, say like 29th Avenue?
So 29th Avenue is actually a minor arterial street, so through the neighborhood street improvements program, we cannot use that funding for arterial streets. It's only for locals and collectors. So
okay.
It's coming from a different funding source through LOST. And so we look at streets like this, 14 streets in bad repair and needs to be replaced as well. We look at that as far as a street classification level when applying those funds to reconstructions.
Okay. I know periodically we get communications from residents that, talk about their street, the disrepair of the street, or there's no curb left, or things like that. So I just didn't know how you prioritize which street
and so that's part of what the payment management program that we're looking to implement will help us do and be able to give you the statistics to provide that data to you. But just looking at this street through that data, it would definitely warrant a reconstruction.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not saying it shouldn't be redone. I'm just curious what the process is for. So, okay.
Well, last year we did Northview, right?
That was actually 27th. It finished up last year.
Oh, finished up last year, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I know when we do a major street reconstruction project, when it's all done, it's great for the neighborhood, but when it's going on, everybody that lives on that street is greatly inconvenienced. So, so I understand that. But so the cost, this is what, probably about a half-mile long stretch?
Oh, yes. Be between a quarter and a half. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at the cost of total reconstruction for that short of a road, almost $1 million, just under $1 million. I mean, it's extremely expensive. So
it does have roughly $100,000 worth of water mains improvements that will be reimbursed through the water department for that as well. That's included in that estimate.
Oh, okay.
It was detailed in your memo. But,
Other questions? All right, on to community development. Mr. Hockett.
I'll turn this off. Well, I'm going to give a brief update on the zoning code, or zoning map update. We had a bunch of open house. Well, first off, just want to make sure everybody's aware of our dedicated page to the project. Can be found around the city website, and we've been pushing it pretty good in the messenger. Anytime we do a news article, we're pushing folks to the website. That's where we're giving them all the updates. They can see the existing map, proposed map, some relevant links that we may bring up when we're talking about it, and then we try to provide some general updates. I did provide an update a couple weeks ago, but I forgot to hit publish. I just noticed that today, so I got to go update it again and hit publish again to keep it updated. With these open houses, we did have 4 of them. They were pretty well attended back in October, early November. I think we had about 100 people total. I think everybody came by at least to one, as much as they could, and we appreciate that. We got slammed pretty good when we came into those meetings. We had people lined up waiting. I know Steve jumped in and helped us set up our easels because the folks were eagerly waiting for us. So we had pretty good success. Like I said, about 100 people, and then from there, word did spread, which is success, but then it slows the project down because you're getting people that weren't engaged, didn't care, and all of a sudden they realize, I care. So we've been doing a lot of, since those open houses, we've been doing a lot of individual meetings with property owners, primarily along Highway 100 and Highway 13. There's one owner along there mainly, but we've been working with that family to kind of discuss the zoning map versus zoning code. We're getting closer on the zoning map issues, but they still have a lot of issues with the code. Some of the districts we created aren't as liberal in their uses. We had an old district called O1 that allowed everything from single-family homes to large office, small retail, multifamily. That district's gone. You don't zone that way. It's kind of a free-for-all. That's gone away, so they're concerned that they're losing a lot of use of their land because they don't know what they want to do, so they wanted the zoning to allow them to do whatever they came up with. So they're bringing up this question, but that's a code issue, not a map issue. But we're still working through some general map questions. I suspect they may make a request to the council to ask us to create a district that'll give them more flexibility than we currently have, or what we used to have. We've also been taking a long look and meeting with property owners. We have a lot of old light manufacturing areas in the community. Lions Lane, kind of where Timberline is, Lions Lane on back. Commercial Avenue, I think some of you folks have heard from those folks as well. And then I think it's Chandler Court where Culligan's, Anderson Automotive used to be. They had kind of an industrial feel or light manufacturing feel, and we were proposing a commercial zoning on the north side of a cul-de-sac off the highway. It's really not commercial property, but initially we were pretty concerned about giving them manufacturing there just because that opens it up to a lot of uses adjacent to residential that we were concerned about. But as we've met with the property owners, kind of seeing how the property is being used, the size of the property, and what's allowed in the M1 district, we're feeling pretty comfortable, and we've started looking at those districts to kind of bring that light manufacturing district back into them. It doesn't fix all the nonconformities out there, but it does fix a lot of them. And it does give those businesses an ability to keep investing in the buildings and the properties, expand if they have opportunities, hopefully they do, and it allows them to sell the land without any major issues. And then the last part, we've been busy combining. We zoned the property very much how the zoning district, like lot sizes, and then we had a lot of little lot here, lot here, lot here. So we started trying to combine those into adjacent properties to make them a little bit more, not have such a splatter-looking zoning map, trying to combine and make them a little more uniform in the zoning code or the zoning districts. And Nicole's been working really hard on that over the past month. We went from 22 to 31 zoning districts, and she's had to go in here and identify the parcels. And I mean, it's hard to see on the map, but She has to go in there and find the parcel, correct the parcel, and do that for basically every parcel in town. She can do it in some groups, but it's tedious work and it does take some time. And she's still got regular current work to go through. So she's put a lot of time into us, and it's wonderful, and we're almost done. Yeah, the map's taken a while, but we are finally getting there. So we're going. The big issue is the nonconformity. Again, I think we've corrected most of that, but the open houses, they did trigger the conversations. People went back home, talked to car sales guys, talked to car sale guys. They all started talking, and along Fifth Avenue here, the old railroad corridor, a lot of guys realized, well, I want to add on to my warehouse, and that zoning was adopted over a year ago, and they're realizing now that they can't, necessarily add on to their building. Well, they can, but they don't want to. It has to be brick, has to be stone. It can't just be your Morton building. And they have to pave their property. They don't want to pave their property. That's all expense. So that group's coming out, and they're trying to work through some of their concerns as well. And I know they've talked to a few of you. They may keep reaching out. But that property's been zoned and done for over a year. But again, it started creating this discussion. Again, it's kind of slowed it down a little bit so we can address their concerns. So I'm going to quickly just where we are right now and where we hope to be tomorrow and beyond. We're still meeting with the property owners. The Bjornson family, of course, they've got a lot invested in the south side of town, and we're trying to work through their concerns. And I think we're getting closer. We'd like to have everything kind of hopefully settled among staff and them before we even get it to the council and have to have long discussions here. We'd really like to come kind of with a unified agreement with where we're happy with the zoning, and I guess come in a little bit, coming together on it. Nicole's still, again, making some few more minor map changes, and that should be done here in the next week or two. So now we're into the next phase that we have to do kind of concurrently with the map or slightly before, the code amendments to allow us to adopt the map. I said in a reasonable yet transparent manner. That's the next item on the agenda regarding notification signs, and there will be a correction that Tom will mention on that staff report. And then we're having to go through the code and find all the references to all the old zoning districts. Sign code calls out all the old districts. We got to plug in the new districts. Landscaping code calls the old districts. We got to bring in the new districts. So we got to do that for each section now. I just do a control find, replace all these districts. And there's probably hundreds of references, so we have to go through the document really carefully and find all those. That'll take a little bit of time. But we'll get that done. And once we get those done, we can start moving the map forward with those code amendments as well. And then now we have to move into the design standards. We've had design standards kind of come and go through the corridor. We've got a pretty good base of design standards. We just got to bring those forward and bring those into the new districts as well. This does not affect the corridor area at all, from roundabout to 35th. Those are done, but now we got to start looking at the highways. Tower Terrace has got some, and a few other commercial nodes we got to start looking at. So next steps really is, once we get the text part done, we'll really move into we'll try to get the owner maps completed and work through that, then begin the formal process. I'm not going to throw a date on here because I'll be reminded if I miss it, I'll be reminded every meeting I come to. But we're going to be ambitious with it. We will have another open house prior to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Hopefully address a lot of concerns or questions before the meeting to make it a little bit easier meeting. I suspect they'll probably open a public hearing, leave it open for a month to allow comments and thought to occur. Hopefully we'll get a recommendation out of them after a meeting or two. We'll take some time to amend the map based on their conversations, and then we'll move into the city council phase. And again, we'll probably do another open house before city council, again, hopefully to answer a lot of questions out in the hallway as opposed to having to answer questions here that might not be, it might just be my concern as a property owner, not a general map or code question. And then I suspect, again, we'll we'll have to have at least 3 readings. I suspect we'll leave the open houses open, open meetings, the public hearing open, so folks can keep coming in and address the council with any questions or concerns. So that's where we're at. Like I said, it was October, November when we kind of wrapped up that open house. I wanted to let you know we are still working toward it. It's just the property owners really, when they want to get engaged, they really got to slow the process down, and we're trying to keep them engaged as much as possible.
When realistically do you see design standards being in place for?
We got a good base. I don't think it'll take that long to add those in. We've got a good base from tower terrace conditions and some previous design standards we had in place. And we've got some for multifamily and big box already done. They just got to be kind of vetted a little bit amongst staff and then brought forward.
And that will include like Highway 13 area?
Yeah, it'll be both highways, and then it'll be corridor and then tower terrace.
Yeah. I think the sooner the better. I mean, you can already sense development and projects starting to take shape out there.
Yeah.
And I think the sooner that we have design standards, the happier we're going to be with the end result.
Right, and you can drive around town, you see new projects, you can tell, on along Highway 13, you know the side that has design standards, you know the side that does not have design standards just based on what's being built. So we're getting there. We're getting really close.
Thanks, Dave. Any other questions for Dave? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I was intrigued when you said we went from 21 to 31 or something.
Yeah.
In my mind, it would have gone the other way, consolidating. Was this typical to have more categories now?
We added a lot more residential categories. It's kind of deceptive. We added 4 what we're going to call traditional zoning. So we have 4 new categories, kind of more or less in the old town area, that allows for smaller lots, smaller setbacks, and allows a little bit more. I don't call it variance, but a little bit more relief without having to go through the variance process. So we got 4 new districts just created right in this area for the homes, and then we've separated out. When I say R2, that's everything. Everything yellow. It's kind of hard to see in this map, but everything yellow is R2. It's kind of hard to see underneath all those lines. 70% of the city, so you can have lots from 6,000 to 1 acre, and nothing's. We fill this room when we come and rezone, and you have a 10,000 square foot lot, and the developer comes in and wants to do a 6,000 square foot lot, it'll fill this room with folks that are upset about the size of the lots. So we've created more districts to say, hey, here's your 6,000 square foot lots. If you want to develop 8, you're going to have to do this one. So we, again, created more residential districts, but they better define what will be there. So if you're going to be a prospective property owner, you can see the zoning behind you and realize, okay, that lot has to be 8,000 square feet. Yeah. So I'm okay with my 10,000 square foot lot, but I might not be okay with it if it's a 6,000 square foot lot. So it gives developers, builders, homeowners a lot more direction on what's going to occur.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. The one that I went to, y'all did a nice job. My other question is, if you had to put a percentage on how much you guys have compromised from what you started with and hoped, because you've said there have been a lot of conversations.
Not too much. I mean. Not too much. It was just, it was one of the, most of it's we can go this way or this way. We went, I guess we took a left, they wanted to go right. And we're both getting to the same destination, just a little different ways. But I think the bypass has still got that's an issue of code, not an issue of the map. They might have another opinion about that, but I think we're getting close with those folks. So.
And then my last question is the design standards. Will that, because it's part of this process but wasn't put out for the open houses, is that more of a once you determine the districts, it's kind of like, here are the design standards, or are you anticipating trying to have a back and forth?
Just started talking about design standards last week, so I can't even answer that. Tom may have a feeling on it right now, but I don't. So.
Okay, that's fair. Thanks.
So one of the concerns that we have, and the mayor broached the subject a little bit, where areas have some design standards and do not. Over the years, we've developed a standard set of design standards that we generally attach to a rezoning request when it's commercial. So I think since this council, every time there's a commercial zoning, you'll see, well, it has this standard that's approved with it. Well, if you go back for years and years, there's a lot of areas that have design standards, But prior to that conditional zoning, there are areas that do not. So when we rezone the community, Tower Terrace Road's prime example, the hours of operation, where a restaurant goes, all of that goes away. All the conditional zoning goes away for those properties. So what we want to ensure is that we at least have that base design standard language in there so that we're covered. And what we'd like to do is just make that a standard for all commercial development, is that we got that baseline at least. The real question would be, and I think we'll bring this to the council, is going to be whether we want to dive into a very detailed design standard, or we want to kind of use the general one that we've been using for a period of time. My recommendation would be to do a general one and probably in the onset, and then if we want to do a deeper dive, take some time to do that.
But will does the general one include building materials, a certain percentage of, okay, good.
Yep. They would be similar to what we did for the corridor overlay during the interim before we adopted. There's very specific standards uptown and at the neighborhood in Indian Creek. It's kind of a modification between the two. But material listing, percentages of brick and stone and hardy materials and things like that.
They're going to apply across the board.
Yes. Yep. Primarily targeted at commercial
commercial corridors.
Yeah. Multifamily as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry, multifamily too. Even the state standards, if you notice the projects that have been done with tax credits, whether they're workforce or senior or low-income housing tax credit, the state has standards that they use that are higher than the standards that we have in place for multifamily in most districts. But there aren't a lot of areas that are being that can be purchased and then developed without a rezoning. So that's why you see most of the stuff that we are doing, it just has conditions applied to it. So we'd like to make that standard across the board, and there's not a lot of questions about it. And every time we come to the council, there's not a whole litany of design standards as a condition to the rezoning. So.
Now, just one other thing to add, if you do have folks calling, emailing, talking to you, and if they do want information, again, the website, that project website page is got the most current information, probably it'll have the most accurate map later this week, but I'd encourage those folks to go there, or yourselves to go there to kind of get that information if Tom, I, or Nicole's not available. So.
Okay. I've only had one party contact me, but I think you've already been in discussions with them. So
I've been in quite a few of them. So.
Other questions on this? All right. Anything on numbers 3 through 6? And number 7, are you doing that one, Dave, or is that Tom?
No, Your Honor, that's just directing staff to draft a policy regarding safe routes to parks. This is related back to...
But we've already discussed. Okay.
I would... number 2 was starred, and I think you may have thought that was associated with the zoning map.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Did I skip one?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So we're setting the date for a public hearing regarding a sign code amendment, and in the staff report, there's a detailing of what we're trying to accomplish here. Really what it comes down to is when we do adopt the zoning map, per the code, we'd have to put a sign in everyone's front yard, which I don't think anybody wants to do. So we're trying to figure out what we want to do at such time we have a large rezoning. I don't even think when we did some of the rezonings in the past, when we did an annexation and we rezoned neighborhoods, we'll just post them at the entryways, and the code says it should be in everyone's front yard. So we wanted to make sure that when we do proceed forward, we're doing it appropriately and correctly. So we're making a proposal that when we have a large zoning, that we would have the opportunity to post a notice in 3 public buildings ahead of the hearing. We obviously still go forward and do the mailings, the web pages and such. For anything but a citywide rezoning, even if it's a neighborhood, we will send postcards to everyone in that neighborhood, and then we also do the adjacent property owners out to, I think we go up to between 200 and 300 feet with every one of those. So even if we have a large rezoning, let's say there's 40 properties in a rezoning, we don't want to put 40 signs in everyone's yard. We still do the mailings, we still do the notices, and so that all that stuff is still covered. We just want that opportunity to be able to follow the code and then also provide some form of public notification. And working with legal, they thought this was acceptable. This was presented at the Planning Commission meeting, and David noted that in the staff report it said that the zoning official would make the call on when that happens. The Planning Commission felt strongly that they should be able to know that ahead of time. So when we do when a rezoning request comes forward or the city's initiating that, if we are going to go to an alternative method such as the one identified, we would go to the Planning Commission before and say, hey, this is how we plan to notice for this meeting, and get some concurrence from them. So, I think in the staff report it says the zoning official would make that recommendation. So, are there any questions or concerns with that? And this is just setting the date, so there will be holding the public hearing in 2 weeks. So if there's questions between now and then, you can feel free to reach out to me. But we do really try to be transparent when we have rezoning requests. Everybody gets postcards. The citywide one, I think we're trying to. I think we did the newsletter. We've done the website. We've held all the open houses. Honestly, until there's a public hearing, probably at the council level, and it's covered in the press, that's when everybody really pays attention. But we try to make sure that they have knowledge of it prior to that as well. So.
And there has been some press about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, other questions? Are we going to add the appointment to the Historic Preservation Committee on Thursday?
I can add it to Thursday or
So we'll
next
have that
meeting.
additional item, an appointment to the Historic Preservation Committee to fill a open position on that. So, other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, everyone.